Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Mark Anderson's corner office on the 32nd floor of Boston's financial district offered a panoramic view of the city he helped shape. 15 years of structural engineering had taught him to spot irregularities, and lately, the foundation of his life showed concerning cracks. He scrolled through Sarah's recent credit card statements, noting the pattern of business lunches at Bastille Kitchen and Le Bellier. $300 for lunch seemed excessive, even for client meetings. Sarah had always been careful with expenses before, documenting every client interaction meticulously for her PR firm's records. Mr. Anderson, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. The contractors from the Berkshire site are here. Send them in. Mark minimized the browser window, his expression neutral as three men entered, led by Mike Reeves, their foreman. About the support beams, Reeves began shuffling papers nervously. We've had to make some adjustments to the original plans. Mark leaned back, studying the man's averted gaze. Adjustments that added $40,000 to our budget. Material costs have gone up. And with the specifications Mr. Mitchell provided. James Mitchell is a real estate agent. Mark interrupted, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made others instinctively straighten their posture. He doesn't provide structural specifications. That's my job. The meeting ended with Reeves promising revised quotes. But Mark had seen enough. The contractors, supposedly James Mitchell's trusted team, had attempted 3 major shortcuts in the past month alone. As a structural engineer, he'd caught issues that could have compromised the entire building's integrity. That evening, rather than heading home, Mark drove to their Beacon Hill townhouse. Sarah's text had been predictable. Emergency with the Carlton account. Don't wait up. Love you. The house felt different now, each room holding memories he questioned. Had Sarah been laughing at him all along? Had her recent enthusiasm for redecorating been preparation for someone else's taste? In his home office, Mark began the task he'd been postponing, organizing decades of paperwork. Sarah had been oddly insistent about him clearing out the clutter, especially after she'd hired a professional organizer last month. The leather-bound volume caught his attention immediately. Unlike his engineering journals, this one bore no title on its spine. Sarah had always kept her current diary in her bedside drawer, a habit as consistent as her morning yoga routine. Finding an old one tucked among his college memorabilia felt like discovering a miscalculated load-bearing point in a blueprint. The early entries matched his memories. September 15, 2020. Mark surprised me with Hamilton tickets tonight. He remembered how much I wanted to see it. Sometimes I can't believe how lucky I am. He's always thinking ahead, planning for our future. Most men would have spent their inheritance on themselves, but Mark's investing it all in our dreams. Then came the shift 2 years ago. April 15, 2022. First meeting with James Mitchell about vacation properties today. He's everything Mark isn't. Spontaneous, passionate, alive. When he showed me the lakefront listings, his hand brushed mine, and I felt more in that moment than I have in years of Mark's careful planning. The entries grew more frequent, more detailed. May 3, 2022. James understands me in ways Mark never has. Today at Le Bellier, in our private dining room, we talked for hours about dreams, about escape. He thinks I'm wasting my talent playing the dutiful wife. Says with my PR skills and his real estate connections, we could build an empire. June 20, 2022. David's lake house is perfect for our meetings. He's been so helpful, keeping our secret. Says he's always thought Mark was too rigid, too focused on his career. The lake house has become our sanctuary. James brings champagne, and we plan our future while watching the sunset. Mark's fingers tightened on the diary as he read about weekend meetings disguised as client emergencies, about elaborate plans coordinated through Sarah's sister Emma. August 12, 2023. Emma's been amazing. She's documenting everything that could help with the divorce. Every time Mark works late, every conversation about money, she's spinning it perfectly. Mark, the controlling husband, obsessed with his career, financially restrictive. Being a junior lawyer at Harrison and Pike gives her access to the best legal minds. Thomas, Mark's old college friend, is a senior partner there. The irony of him unknowingly helping build our case is amusing. The next entry made his blood run cold. March 1, 2024. The Burkshire House is our miracle. Mark thinks he's building our dream home, using his inheritance and savings to create an $850,000 anniversary surprise. He has no idea he's financing our escape. James already has buyers lined up for his house, and David's helping with the paperwork. The contractors are charging extra, skimming enough to fund our fresh start. Just a few more months of playing the devoted wife. A knock interrupted his reading. "Hey, buddy. Thought I'd check how the house plans are coming along." David Williams stood in the doorway, restaurant owner confident in his tailored suit. 15 years of friendship, through divorces, business failures, family deaths, and now this. "Perfect timing," Mark said, gesturing to a chair. "I was just reviewing the contractor quotes you recommended." David settled in, loosening his tie, finding everything in order. Interesting choice of words. Mark kept his voice neutral. The support beam specifications seem creative. "Construction costs are high these days," David shrugged. But his eyes darted to the diary on Mark's desk. "Sarah mentioned you've been working late. Thought you might need a break. The lake house is always open to you." "How generous." Mark allowed a slight pause. "It's been getting a lot of use lately, I hear." A flicker of tension crossed David's face. "Regular maintenance. You know how old properties are." "I do." Mark stood, walking to his window. "Foundations are crucial. One crack, one weakness, and everything can collapse." David made his excuse and left shortly after, his usual smooth confidence noticeably shaken. That evening, Sarah's sister Emma hosted a dinner celebrating her upcoming promotion to junior partner at Harrison and Pike. Mark watched the performance unfold around him. Emma, radiant in designer businesswear, documented every time he checked his work phone. "Mark, you must be so proud of the Burkshire House," she probed. "Such a big investment. Sarah says you've been quite particular about the budget." Sarah touched his arm with practiced concern. "Honey, you've barely touched your wine. Is everything okay at work?" He watched her hand brush James Mitchell's as she reached for her glass. Saw the quick exchange of glances. James had arrived halfway through dinner, claiming he was just dropping off some property papers. His tan looked fresh, probably from the weekend at David's lake house that Sarah had claimed was a PR conference. "Everything's fine," Mark replied, raising his glass, just thinking about the future. To new beginnings, they all clinked glasses, none realizing what his toast really meant. The diary in his briefcase held their secrets, their plans, their betrayals. But Mark Anderson held something far more valuable, the element of surprise. Later that night, after Sarah claimed another PR emergency and left, Mark made 2 phone calls. The first to Angela Chan, a forensic accountant he'd worked with on construction fraud cases. The second to Michael Jean, his college roommate turned cybersecurity specialist. The game was already in motion. Sarah, James, David, Emma. They'd built their plan, assuming Mark was too trusting, too absorbed in his work to notice. They never considered that the same analytical mind that found flaws in building designs might also see the cracks in their perfect plot. Their mistake wasn't in betraying him. Their mistake was in underestimating him. Mark looked out over the Boston skyline, his reflection hard and determined in the glass. Tomorrow, the dismantling would begin. But tonight, he would play his role perfectly. After all, Sarah wasn't the only one who knew how to put on a performance. Angela Chan's office overlooked Boston Harbor, its minimalist design reflecting her precise approach to forensic accounting. She studied the financial records spread across her desk, her expression growing darker with each page. They weren't even subtle about it, she said as Mark sat across from her. "Your wife's been siphoning money through a series of transactions disguised as PR firm expenses. Look at these event planning charges from David's restaurant. Mark leaned forward, examining the documents. How much? Nearly $200,000 transferred to a private account over 18 months. Angela highlighted several entries. She used David's restaurant as a front. Every corporate event was just a way to move money. Basic laundering, really. I'm almost insulted by how obvious it is. Show me everything. Angela pulled up detailed spreadsheets on her monitor. Monthly transfers, all under the reporting threshold. PR firms' books showed legitimate-looking expenses for event planning, client entertainment, venue rental, but cross-referenced with David's restaurant records. She clicked through several documents. No actual events, just paper trails and fake invoices. Documentation. Everything's here. Angela handed him a USB drive. All legally obtained, all admissible. I've highlighted the most egregious violations. The IRS would be very interested in how David's been reporting these events. Mark pocketed the drive. What about the construction payments? That's where it gets interesting. Angela pulled up another file. Your contractors have been overcharging by about 40%. The excess gets split. Half to an account controlled by James Mitchell, half to various shell companies. Classic kickback scheme. As Mark drove to his next meeting, Sarah called. He put her on speaker. Honey, Emma's planning a surprise party for Thomas next month. Could you transfer $10,000 to our joint account? I want to help with the costs since he's been such a good friend. Mark's grip tightened on the steering wheel. $10,000 for a party. Well, you know Thomas, only the best. And after all he's done for us. Of course, Mark kept his voice neutral. I'll take care of it. Michael Jung's cybersecurity firm occupied a converted warehouse in Cambridge. His old college roommate had grown from a dorm room specialist into one of Boston's top digital security experts. You're not going to like what I found, Michael said, leading Mark to a secure room. Your wife's been busy. Separate email account, encrypted messaging, detailed documentation of your assets. He pulled up screenshots on a large monitor. She's been sharing everything with James. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property valuations. They've got spreadsheets tracking your work schedule, travel patterns, even your gym routine. Show me. Michael opened various files. It's all here. Emails, messages, shared documents. They've been planning this for nearly 2 years. Sarah's been photographing financial documents, sending them to James through encrypted channels. What about Emma's involvement? That's the real prize. Michael pulled up another folder, finding these in Sarah's cloud storage. Emma's been building a case against you for months. Look at these incident reports. Normal conversations twisted to sound controlling, routine financial discussions painted as abuse. He scrolled through documents. She's got witness statements from David about your aggressive behavior at his restaurant, alleged arguments about money, accusations of financial control, all carefully dated, documented, and completely fabricated. Can you access James's professional records? Michael's grin was predatory. Already did. Found some interesting communications with those contractors. Also discovered he's been using his firm's client database to identify potential properties for their future business ventures. Highly illegal. Everything documented. Completely. All obtained through legal channels, shared accounts, joint devices, cloud storage you had access to. Nothing that can't be used in court or sent to regulatory bodies. Mark spent the next week compiling evidence. He created detailed reports of James's ethical violations, undervalued property comparisons, contractor kickbacks, misuse of client information. Each document was meticulously organized, every allegation supported by hard evidence. One morning, Sarah mentioned a client crisis requiring her immediate attention. Mark tracked her phone's location to David's lake house. Through the restaurant's security cameras, which Michael had accessed legally due to Mark's part ownership in the business. A detail Sarah had forgotten. He watched David create fake event planning receipts. That afternoon, Mark sent anonymous reports to the State Real Estate Board and James's firm's ethics committee. He attached proof of the construction crew's fraudulent practices to a complaint to the state contractors board. Emma made her move a week later, scheduling lunch to discuss her concerns about his behavior. "Mark, as your sister-in-law and a lawyer, I feel obligated to address some patterns I've noticed." She began, her expression of concern almost convincing. Mark activated the recording app on his phone, legally, as they were in a public place. "What patterns would those be?" "There have been incidents. Sarah's mentioned feeling financially restricted. And David's told me about some concerning behavior at his restaurant." "Really?" Mark's voice remained calm. "Like the incident reports you've been fabricating, or the witness statements you've been collecting from David about events that never happened?" Emma's professional mask slipped. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." Mark pulled out a folder. "In fact, I have copies of everything. Your detailed reports, your carefully crafted narrative, your communications with Sarah about building a divorce case. Interesting reading. Those are privileged documents, not when they're fabricated evidence stored on shared cloud accounts." Mark's smile was cold. "How do you think Harrison and Pike would react to proof that their newest junior partner is creating false evidence? How would the Bar Association view that?" Emma's face drained of color. "You wouldn't dare. I already have." Mark stood. "Thomas received copies this morning. He's probably reviewing them right now, deciding between protecting you and protecting his firm's reputation." Her phone buzzed. Thomas's name appeared on the screen. Mark left her staring at it, her carefully constructed future crumbling around her. That evening, Sarah was especially attentive. "You seem tense, honey. The vacation house project getting to you?" "Just thinking about the future," Mark replied, watching her tap out a message to James under the table. "Everything will work out perfectly," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Trust me." Mark did trust her. Trusted her complete inability to imagine him as anything but the predictable, trusting husband she'd married. Her fatal flaw wasn't her infidelity or her greed. It was her absolute certainty that she was the cleverest person in the room. The next day, Thomas called an emergency meeting at Harrison and Pike. Emma sat in the conference room, her legal career disintegrating as senior partners reviewed her misconduct. "This is a mistake," she protested. "Those documents are taken out of context." "There is no context," Thomas interrupted, "where fabricating evidence is acceptable. The Bar Association has been notified. Clean out your office." James Mitchell was having an equally bad day. His firm's ethics committee had called him in for an emergency review. The evidence was overwhelming. Property manipulation, contractor kickbacks, client data theft. "This is ridiculous," he blustered. "I'm your top agent." "Not anymore," his manager replied, sliding over suspension papers. "The state board is investigating. We're cutting ties." David's restaurant received notice of an IRS audit. The fake event planning payments had drawn attention. His carefully maintained books wouldn't withstand scrutiny. Sarah remained oblivious, still certain her perfect escape plan was on track. She didn't notice Mark's careful documentation of her financial misconduct, didn't realize every move she made was being recorded, every transaction tracked. Their game of deception was ending. But only one player knew the score. Mark sat in his office, reviewing Angela's final report. Every piece was in place: financial records, digital evidence, legal documentation. Sarah and her conspirators had built their plan assuming he was too trusting to notice, too conventional to act. They never considered that the same mind that found flaws in building designs might also see the weaknesses in their scheme. Their mistake wasn't just betrayal. Their mistake was underestimating the man they betrayed. Mark closed the report and picked up his phone. It was time for the final phase. Sarah wanted an escape plan. He'd give her one. Just not the one she expected. The dismantling was complete. Now came the execution. Mark Anderson sat in his lawyer Richard Holbrook's corner suite, offering a view of Boston's financial district where this all began. The morning sun glinted off surrounding buildings as they reviewed the final documents. Everything's in place, Richard said, spreading papers across his mahogany desk. The timing has to be perfect. Walk me through it again. Richard pulled up several documents on his monitor. Your protected assets are secured. The trust your grandfather set up is ironclad. Sarah can't touch it. We've documented every instance of financial misconduct, including the $200,000 she siphoned through David's restaurant. The vacation property, Waijong, is ready. His investment firm specializes in quick, discreet real estate acquisitions. The paperwork's prepared. Once you give the word, we can close within hours. Mark nodded. In the foundation, articles of incorporation are filed. The Phoenix Foundation, supporting survivors of financial misconduct. The press release is ready, emphasizing the anonymous donor's personal experience with spousal betrayal and financial fraud. Local media is already interested. They love these human interest stories. Richard pulled out another folder. The divorce papers are prepared. Want to review the note again? No need. Mark stood, straightening his suit. Time to end this. The next morning, Mark met Waijong at the property registration office. Sarah was at her PR firm's quarterly board meeting, a perfect alibi for what was about to happen. Mr. Anderson. Wai's handshake was firm, his smile knowing. The funds are ready for transfer. My clients appreciate discreet transactions. Within 2 hours, the Burkshire vacation home had new owners. The $100,000 profit landed in Mark's private account, while the foundation received an anonymous donation, matching what would have been Sarah's share. Mark's phone buzzed. James Mitchell calling. He let it go to voicemail, imagining James' panic when he checked property records and found his escape plan vaporized. The next phase began at the State Real Estate Board. Mark watched from across the street as James emerged from their offices, face action. His firm had already cut ties, their reputation in Boston's luxury market too valuable to risk. Mr. Mitchell, a local reporter approached, camera rolling. Any comment on the allegations of ethical violations and fraud? James shoved past them, but the damage was done. By evening, his suspension was public knowledge. 10 years building his reputation in Boston's luxury real estate market destroyed in a day. At David's restaurant, IRS agents conducted their audit. Mark watched through the restaurant's security cameras, still accessible through his part ownership, as they questioned staff about non-existent events. One agent said, "Could you explain these payments for corporate events? We can't find any corresponding bookings." David's usual smooth confidence crumbled. There must be some mistake. Several $100,000 worth of mistakes. Sarah's carefully constructed exit strategy was unraveling thread by thread. Her hidden funds were frozen, pending investigation. Emma's legal career lay in ruins. David's restaurant faced crippling scrutiny. Mark's phone buzzed again. Sarah this time. "Honey, something's wrong with our accounts. I can't access." "Strange," Mark replied, his voice neutral. "Have you checked with the bank? They're saying something about a fraud investigation, and James isn't answering his phone. Must be stressful, like planning a secret divorce or having an affair." The silence on the line was deafening. "Mark," Sarah's PR-trained voice wavered. "I can explain. Save it for your crisis management team." "Oh, wait. Aren't you on indefinite leave?" He ended the call, nodding to Richard. Time for the final move. At precisely 2 p.m., a courier entered Sarah's PR firm carrying divorce papers and a sealed envelope. Mark watched through the lobby security feed as Sarah received them, her carefully maintained composure cracking as she read his note. Surprise. Found a better retirement plan. Attached were copies of her diary entries, financial records, documented evidence of every betrayal. In the office around her, phones began ringing as news of the Phoenix Foundation's launch spread. Local media loved the story. Prominent PR executive caught in financial misconduct scandal, her firm's reputation at stake. Sarah rushed home, likely expecting a confrontation. Instead, she found the house empty except for her belongings and meticulously organized evidence of her deceptions. Every drawer, every shelf held proof of another betrayal. Bank statements showing her hidden accounts, photos from David's lake house, emails with James planning their escape. Mark watched from his hotel suite as Sarah emerged from their house hours later. Mascara streaked down her face. His phone began ringing. First Sarah, then James, then David. He blocked each number methodically, like removing damaged supports from a compromised structure. Local news led with James's suspension in the Phoenix Foundation's launch. The Foundation's first workshop was already oversubscribed, identifying signs of financial misconduct in marriages, featuring a prominent divorce attorney as speaker. The next day, Sarah's PR firm announced her indefinite leave of absence due to personal matters. The irony of a PR executive unable to manage her own crisis wasn't lost on industry observers. That evening, Mark sat in Richard's office reviewing the aftermath. Sarah's carefully constructed world had crumbled in 48 hours. No house, no hidden funds, no lover's escape plan. James was facing professional ruin. David's restaurant was under investigation, and Emma's legal career was finished before it began. Ready for the next phase? Richard asked. No next phase, Mark replied, standing. I don't need to watch them suffer. I just needed them to lose everything they tried to take from me. He left their destroyed lives behind, their desperate calls and messages unanswered. They thought him a fool, too trusting to notice their betrayal. Instead, they learned too late that trust, once broken, becomes a weapon in the right hands. 3 days later, Mark checked into a mountain resort, watching snow fall outside his window. His phone contained a single new message from Claire Richardson, an award-winning architect whose sustainable luxury designs had caught his attention. Heard about your renovation work. Interested in collaboration. Mark smiled but didn't respond immediately. He had time now. Time to build something new, something better, from the ruins of betrayal. After all, the best revenge wasn't just destroying the old but creating something stronger in its place. The diary sat in his safe, no longer a record of betrayal, but a reminder that endings are just new beginnings in disguise. Sarah, James, David, they gambled everything on his blind trust and lost everything to his calculated justice. Sometimes, Mark reflected, the perfect revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting ahead, turning betrayal into opportunity. His new life wouldn't include luxury vacation homes or elaborate exit strategies. Instead, it would be built on something far more valuable. The knowledge that he hadn't just survived their betrayal. He turned it into his triumph. The mountain cabin's great room offered a panoramic view of snow-capped peaks, the late autumn sun casting long shadows across Mark Anderson's drafting table. The modest 3-bedroom structure bore little resemblance to the ostentatious Burkshire House that had almost become his prison. Every beam, every angle reflected his engineering expertise. Not a showcase of wealth, but a testament to precision. The integration of passive solar heating is remarkable, Claire Richardson said, studying the blueprints for their latest joint project. The award-winning architect had reached out 6 months ago, intrigued by his renovation work. Most engineers focus on structure without considering environmental impact. Most architects focus on aesthetics without considering structural integrity, Mark countered, earning a knowing smile from Claire. Their professional collaboration had evolved naturally, built on mutual respect and brutal honesty, a refreshing change from his past. The leather-bound diary sat in his office safe, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as insurance against any attempts at reputation rehabilitation. Sarah had tried that route already, hiring a crisis management firm in Chicago to paint herself as the victim of a controlling husband. The diary's contents, combined with financial records, had shut down that narrative quickly. Sarah's move to Chicago had been less an escape than a retreat. Her PR career, once marked by crisis management for Fortune 500 companies, had devolved into handling social media for mid-tier businesses. The scandal had followed her. Potential clients tended to question hiring a PR executive who couldn't manage her own public disgrace. James Mitchell's fall had been even more dramatic. from selling luxury Boston properties to hawking timeshares in St. Louis, represented more than a geographic relocation. It was a professional free fall. His real estate license suspension in Massachusetts had made headlines in industry publications. Now he spent his days convincing retirees to buy fractional ownership in aging beachfront condos. His designer suits were placed by off-the-rack polyester. David Williams had finally sold his restaurant at a 60% loss. The IRS audit had uncovered more than just the fake event planning payments. Years of creative accounting caught up with him. He'd avoided jail through a plea deal, but his reputation in Boston's restaurant scene was irreparably damaged. Last Mark heard, David was managing a chain steakhouse in suburban New Jersey. Emma's legal career ended before it truly began. No law firm would touch a junior lawyer with ethics violations on her record. The State Bar Association's censure ensured she'd never practiced law in Massachusetts. She'd moved back to their parents' house in Connecticut, working as a paralegal in a small-town practice, a far cry from her Harrison and Pike ambitions. Thomas, after reporting Emma's misconduct, had been made senior managing partner at Harrison and Pike. His choice of professional integrity over personal loyalty enhanced his reputation. He and Mark still met for occasional lunches, their friendship stronger for having weathered the storm together. Angela Chan had expanded her forensic accounting practice, using the case as a teaching example for her staff. The complexity of Sarah's financial maneuvers, while ultimately amateurish, provided excellent training material. She'd even spoken at the Phoenix Foundation's workshop, explaining how to spot signs of financial misconduct. Michael Jung's cybersecurity firm landed several high-profile contracts after their handling of the digital evidence. His meticulous documentation of Sarah and James's electronic communications became a case study in legal electronic discovery. He'd recently opened a Boston office, with Mark as one of his first clients. The Phoenix Foundation had exceeded expectations, their workshops on identifying financial misconduct and spousal fraud drawing attendees from across New England. Mark's anonymous donation had grown through additional contributions, funding research into patterns of financial deception in marriages. The Foundation's work had already helped several families identify and stop similar schemes before they developed fully. The contractors who had participated in James's kickback scheme faced their own reckonings. The state board's investigation led to multiple license revocations. The construction industry's tight-knit nature ensured their reputation followed them, making it nearly impossible to find work in New England. Mark's collaboration with Claire had produced 3 successful projects, each showcasing their shared commitment to sustainable luxury design. Their professional relationship evolved gradually into something more personal, built on a foundation of transparency and shared values. Unlike Sarah's calculated affection, Claire's straightforward nature found beauty in honesty rather than manipulation. The mountain cabin, though smaller than the Burkshire House, offered something far more valuable: peace. Its mortgage-free status reflected Mark's new philosophy. True security came not from elaborate escape plans or hidden accounts, but from building something solid and sustainable. Looking out over the valley below, Mark reflected on the past year's transformations. Sarah, James, Emma, and David had gambled everything on their perfect escape plan, certain their victim was too trusting to fight back. Instead, their betrayal had freed him. While they scattered across the country, trying to rebuild shattered lives and ruined reputations, he'd built something new, a life anchored in honesty rather than deception. The diary remained in his safe. Its pages are a reminder that sometimes endings are disguised beginnings. He'd not only survived their betrayal, but had turned it into a foundation for something stronger. His new life wasn't built on escape plans or hidden agendas. Instead, it rested on something far more valuable: the knowledge that the best revenge isn't about destruction, but about creation. From his cabin's deck, the horizon stretched endlessly clear, unmarred by lies or manipulation. He'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in square footage or account balances, but in the ability to sleep soundly, unburdened by deception. Sarah and her conspirators had tried to steal his retirement dream. Instead, they'd given him something priceless: a chance to build a better one. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.